Welcome back to our second hour of the lecture of this week 8 under the subject um, Christianity and in culture. We were talking about the elements of culture, and I've explained three elements of the culture. And we stop at the point where it says, it is not a surprise therefore, that cultural changes often involves a social or society accepting the different story about itself or struggle to do so in order to embrace a new social reality or accept a new view about its own history. Life itself is about history. And this point three we are talking about is the story of our place in the world. It means without a story in our world or in this earth about our forefathers, the beginning of the people, how they started, who was the first person, who was the second person. If we don't have that concrete story, it sounds as if we don't even know what we're saying. But culture has a beginning of itself from the people to the idea of their understanding to the language in which they are speaking and to the practices of things that are involved in them. More so, the issue of symbol is very important or element is important in a culture. Actually, in a religion, we ask a question if their elements is a sin, having an element or symbol is a sin. But we say to some extent, if you try to make an symbol as a sign of worship, then in which you put yourself to that symbol instead of the heart of your Christianity faith in yourself, then it becomes something different. But in a culture, I wouldn't say that it's a sin. I wouldn't say it's not a sin, but you have to look into it by yourself. But we know that it's important and very, very important to get to that system. Now, likewise, what is sometimes referred to as a culture war, it occur when different story clash and compete for public acceptance. Okay, for example, indigenous First Nation people readily and with significant justification contest the story of a settlement in countries like the United States, Australia, Canada, and elsewhere, even in Nigeria. In such places, national holidays can be mourned as ceremony as commemorating invasions and disposition. So these are very important in when the independent, like the independent days, are very important to the countries. Without the independent, the countries feel that they have not been free from there. New Zealand offers somewhat of a contrast with the story of a nation, including the drawing up of a Treaty of Waitangi signed in 1840 between the British colonizers and the indigenous Maori tribes. It was a set of things that differentiate their cultural patterns of story with the cultural patterns of the people in Australia, America, USA, and Canada, and so many elsewhere. So, like I said, the story, when different story clash and compete for the public acceptance. Now, if these countries culture reflect this way and this country reflect it, it bounce, it becomes similar and people gets confused. So it is cost, it moves people to change their concept and then makes others to also throw away back whatever the reality could be in a symbolic way and make something different to bring out the ideal story of their country. And that makes it a new beginning for their symbols. Okay, so that tells us to where we have seen in verse 4. Although the term of the treaty are still debated, particularly in relation to the lack of Maori contribution to to these terms. Now, they did grant Maori people's right of ownership of their land, forests, fisheries, and others' possession, such honors as an attempt to uphold the sovereignty of the Maori's nations, which nations was central to the perseverance of the cultural story. Sadly, this is not the historical recounted by Australian indigenous nations or most Native American tribes in the United States and Canada. Taken together, these depictions of preservation, the lost illustrates the loss illustrates the importance of language, rituals, places, and tradition in the cultural story at the individual and international level. So that makes it so different when you talk about the story on each community could present to identify and um, also mark the reality of their country. And that takes us to number 4, the cultural, the cultural element, which is a greetings on what is good. Now, agreement, agreement on what is good, not greeting. Now, uh, every community or every society are bound to the agreement of certain things. It might be wrong to other countries or other community, but for that country or community might be able to accept it because that shows the difference between such community or either such country with another country. The agreement of what is right and what is wrong. The fourth element of culture is the way a society decides what it means to have a good life. Now that is so tricky and so corny when you look at certain countries that the issue of good lives never exists because it's either you suffer, you struggle before you can have a good life. But other countries are bound to maintain and also help their citizens to have a good life. Let's take for instance, we are in Korea, we can testify a good thing that the Koreans are making to give life color to all Koreans. Even though you don't have a job, you have certain time with which you can earn certain money to be able to feed yourself and take care of yourself. Depending on when things become right. When you lose your job on the way, you still have certain money to cover up with what you can eat and drink and survive until you find yourself something doing. But where laziness occurs, it becomes a different thing. But other countries, which I don't want to mention, the moment you lose your job, you start in a zero level. Things are changed, things are taken away from you. Nothing is being left, and you become a poor, wretched, dejected person. Now, if our government are so right and perfect, agreements to certain things can make life easy to certain extent, and people could be able to appreciate what the country is doing, and that also becomes a sign and way in which maintaining the country practices, beliefs are possible. Extending the analogy, we could say that culture is a way to measure the psychological and emotional health of the society. Uh, this is also very important when you look at what it talks about emotional health of the society, psychological. Now, looking at other people could give you a view that problems are there. But other countries, when you look at them, you so their emotionally, their psychological way of thinking and doing things are perfect to the extent where it proves the authenticity, improve the quality of life that people are living, the quality of things that people can see and test and be able to have as part of their life. So this is really important in a cultural setting and in a cultural environment in which our community could also be of use to the society. The United Nations Development Program regards well-being and the pursuit of happiness as fundamental to the sustainable health of the society. Does it happen in your country? Is it possible that United Nations develop programs regarding well-being of each country? Yes, it's happening. But the government hijacked, the government denied the citizens from earning. The more people in the top are enjoying the well-being, while the masses are suffering to an extent where they felt and think certain things with the United Development Programs have not been reality in at all. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization regards building intercultural understanding via the protections of heritage and support for cultural diversity to be a priority for international peace and stability. So you can say so many programs are being made that people could be able to understand and have the things done in a reality. But people never see and accept whatever it comes to be. These descriptors reflect what individuals or in what individuals and international society believes is a healthy culture. Now, international wise, we can have all it takes to be able to look at whatever is happening, but sometimes we don't understand what is happening. As such, we can say that culture involves agreement on the kind of things that are good for society and can make it flourish. Cultural clash occurs when different societies prioritize different understanding of what these good things are. Remember, I said about different, the clash of cultural clash is when there is the same story being agitated for each country or each community or each people. It becomes a chaos and a problem because you cannot be able to differentiate the same thing from the same people. So the changes are inevitable, becomes reality that they change for the sake of the community. Are we together? Now, if that is true, then we need to understand the issue of the clash occurring when different societies prioritize different understanding of what these good things are. One of the leading frontiers of culture clash worldwide involves the campaign for gender equality in areas such as education, employment, reproductive and marital right. Seriously difficult. Education, well, when if I want to take this as example, coming to Nigeria as a example, typical Example, I don't want to go to other countries where women are seen as not important. If some of you could remember from Nigeria, or some of you who are not the Nigerians, remember where the president of Nigeria was asked about the wife position. He said her position was meant to be, or is meant to be, in the kitchen. You see, she has no respect. He has no respect for gender equality, that the things women cannot do what men can do. But remember the saying that says, what a man can do, a woman can do even much more better, which I believe sometimes. In Ethiopia, the woman is the president or the leader of the country. And we can see how vibrant and hardworking that she is doing to make a difference. But in Nigeria, it's difficult. Even a woman came out for campaigning as a president, and then suddenly everything collapsed. We can't tell exactly what really happened to such a thing. All right? It's difficult for us to understand what is happening. Do we have a right? Yes, we do have a right. Employment. Now, employment cannot be virtually women. When it comes to, let me come back to maybe in Korea, where labor is concerned, where there are hard works where women cannot do it, they now tend to give it to men. Okay? In other countries, employment also, they believe women are supposed to be at home, and so they deny them most jobs and give it to men, partially to our countries. Reproductive and marital rights. Same thing in Africa. I don't know other countries. Women's has been uh, lower position of being productive. Just give birth to children, and then also just say yes to whatever your husband say. Whether you're on the right, you do what's right. You do what is he wants, and what he wants can only be the best for your life. I don't know for you, but in our other countries, it's wrong. The story of Malala Yousafzai from the eastern west of Pakistan reminds us of the power of one individual to aspire an international response on the vital issue of education for girls. In Nigeria, we have a similar one now that is going on, where um, um, people are fighting for women to be able to see that their children, and especially the girls, have been educated. You know, in Hausa they say Boko Haram. Now it means study is forbidden, most especially for women, and that is where we have these terrorists that they call Boko Haram, which are becoming a problem in our society. So let's understand some cultures and be able to avoid issues that could have a stark mark on individual. So the when Malala was 12 and inspired by her teacher's father, she began to speak out for the right to education. Sometimes that was becoming increasingly restricted due to the influence of the Taliban in Pakistan. But in 2012, although critically wounded, Malala survived an assassination attempt at the hands of the Taliban, and on her recovery became a brave advocate for the many millions who were being denied educations due to certain cultural perceptions about girls and their place in society. In 2012, she was co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize and dedicated her prize money to the building of a secondary school for girls in Pakistan. Malala story reminds us that culture is about the way individuals and society define what the idea or ideal good is and the extent to which individuals, citizens like Malala, the global networks inspired by her story, and even those like the Taliban who opposes these visions are willing to campaign for what they consider to be the cultural right. So you can see all that we have said about Malala. It's it's real. It becomes so important that people today can be able to justify their lives, and also to be able to say that this is right. Okay, and with this we want to say that life, it's not bad. All right. Now we have seen the story of Malala, who really made the story or her life situation to bring the issue of human right in culture. Now, the key concept of human right, we can say, United Nations human right, uh, we are we is that we will follow a footstep that could give us um, conditions. A violation of economy, social, and cultural rights occur when a state falls in an obligation to ensure that they are enjoyed without discrimination, or in its obligation to respect, protect, and fully and fulfill them. Often a violation of one of the rights is linked to a violation of the other rights. So you can see the international wise that has given us some vital understanding about looking at what is right, humanly right for us to see. Okay, and with that we can be able to understand the human right. So there are a few examples apart from the Malala's own, which says a few examples of violation of economic, social, cultural rights include uh, forcibly evicting people from their homes, that right to adequate housing. See, now we talk about education with the Malala own, which is about education, that she was, then people, women are denied the issue of study, but now they have opened the way for them to study. So we can see that. But what about human right? Like what happened in China when this COVID-19 sounded or become tense in China? They began to evict people. The landlord will come and throw your things out and ask you to go out. What kind of right? This is violation of human right that we and the nation could be able to fight for individual. Now, this is wrong. The right to adequate housing of individual, you paid, you have an agreement, and that landlord has no right to throw your things out just like that. It is wrong and it is wrong. Contaminating water, okay, for example, with waste from state-owned facilitates the right to health. Now, people don't care about whatever they do, regardless they have a preservation or something that procure and also clean their right of what they do. So we need to understand the issue and to be able to go into what we need to do. Now, number three, if I have to say, what we are doing is that failure to ensure a minimum wages sufficient for a decent living at a society. This is also about what we talk about commonwealth, common health issue. Okay, the health issue is very important for individual. You see, whatever you do, your life is much important. Also, whatever you do, right at work. You are at work, you have a right to certain things that you say, I don't want to do it, I can't do it. But today, we don't have those rights in certain countries because we are not citizens. If we don't do it, they tell you, ka, naga. So if your sergeant, sorry, if your boss say go, you have to go because this is not your country. You are only doing what to do to survive. The right to do that, it is bound. It is bound. Failure to prevent starvations in all areas and communities in the country, which we call the freedom from hunger. What about people who are hungry? I try to bring that sentiment that we cover issue of tribalism, not tribalism, how do you call it? Racism, or rather, because we are not Koreans, we have been given certain things at a time, and certain things are given many to the Koreans, or those who are married to Koreans. Also, the children are being in school at home, but some of the Koreans were being paid some money, but our children were not paid because we are not Korean citizens. Okay, these are wrong. These are also what we are talking about. But this is culture. What do we have to say? It's not anything, but we need to understand because it's culture. Denying access to information and services related to sexual and reproductive health, the right to good health. But it's not so common today when it comes to that, but it is common to those who understand what is right. Whatever we do, whatever we say, we need to understand that our right is there. We have the right to do whatever we want to do. So we need to understand that it is the right thing for us to do what is right. So at this moment, I want to say, because of our time, we need to stop here in our second lecture, second hour, so that we can continue from there when we return. But when we come back, we will not continue here. So far, we have talked about all these four elements of what? Of culture. And we will go into other differences that has to be initiated when it comes to culture. Thank you for paying attention, and thank you for being with us. See you at the next hour. Thank you.